Part 1. The Hidden Secret of Mastery. The hook. It was a hot summer afternoon in a small American town. A young man named Daniel sat on the porch of his house, his head in his hands. He had been working for years, long hours, endless effort, but his life still felt stuck. Why don't the results ever come? He whispered to himself. His neighbors seemed to move ahead. His friends bought cars, built businesses, or found better jobs. Yet Daniel felt invisible. He worked hard, but inside he carried frustration and doubt. One question haunted him. When will it be my turn? That afternoon, Daniel's grandfather, an old carpenter with rough, weathered hands, stepped onto the porch. He saw Daniel's heavy heart and quietly sat beside him. After a long silence, the old man spoke. "Daniel, do you know why most people quit before their dreams ever arrive?" Daniel shook his head. "They spend all their time staring at the results instead of falling in love with the work. And that," his grandfather said, "is the greatest mistake of all." Lesson 1. The work itself is the reward. His grandfather leaned back in his chair and began to tell a story. "Years ago, I worked in a small workshop. Every day I carved wood. Tables, chairs, cabinets, it didn't matter. I woke before dawn, smelled the sawdust in the air, and got lost in my craft. One of the younger men in the shop wanted only to make money. He rushed every job. He dreamed about selling the furniture, about the profit, about the applause from customers. But when business was slow, he became bitter and frustrated. I, on the other hand, never worked for the applause. I worked because I loved shaping the wood. Every cut of the chisel, every stroke of the sandpaper, gave me peace. In time, my furniture spoke for itself. People came from far away just to buy what I made. The other man quit long before success could find him." Daniel listened carefully. His grandfather's words reminded him of something he had read once, a principle from Napoleon Hill. "Do not wait for your ship to come in. Swim out to meet it." It suddenly became clear. Success was never about waiting for results. It was about honoring the process. Lesson 2. The craftsman's secret. That night, Daniel could not sleep. His grandfather's story stirred something inside him. He thought of a craftsman shaping wood, or a baker kneading dough before sunrise. These people were not chasing recognition. They were chasing excellence in their daily effort. The truth was simple. Those who love the process never quit, because the work itself gives them strength. Daniel thought of Thomas Edison. He had read that Edison tested thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. If Edison had obsessed over quick results, he would have given up. But he didn't. He loved the process of testing, learning, and trying again. And then there was Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, who wrote, "Do every act of your life as though it were your last." He wasn't writing about applause or trophies. He was writing about honoring each moment of work as sacred. Daniel finally understood. Success belongs not to those who chase results but to those who fall in love with the work itself. Lesson 3. Small acts, big power. The next morning, Daniel woke with a new idea. Instead of worrying about the future, he would commit himself to a small daily practice. He took a notebook and wrote a simple rule: show up. Improve. Repeat. Every day, he would pick one task and give himself fully to it. He would celebrate effort, not outcome. He would measure success by showing up and growing stronger, not by the praise of others. On the first day, he worked in the garden. Instead of rushing through the task, he paid attention to each movement: digging, planting, watering. For the first time, he noticed the beauty of the soil in his hands. On the second day, he sat to write. Instead of thinking about who would read his words, he focused on the joy of putting thoughts onto paper. Slowly, Daniel began to feel lighter. He stopped comparing himself to others. He stopped worrying about when his breakthrough would come. The work itself became his reward. Lesson 4. Why results cannot be controlled. One evening, Daniel's grandfather returned to the porch. He watched Daniel working on a small project, sanding a piece of wood with patience. "You're learning the secret," his grandfather said. "Now let me tell you something even more important. You cannot control results." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "Think of a farmer," the old man explained. "He plants seeds. He waters them, pulls weeds, and protects his field. But can he control the rain? The sun? The wind? No. He cannot force the harvest to come. All he can do is give his best effort every day. The rest is not in his hands. Daniel realized this was true in his own life. He had been living with frustration because he wanted control over things that no person could command: the speed of success, the recognition of others, the timing of results. But if he could not control results, what could he control? His grandfather smiled. You can control how hard you work. You can control how much heart you put into your effort. That's all. And that's enough. Lesson 5. The freedom of effort. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a strange freedom. By focusing only on effort, he was no longer chained to disappointment. He no longer asked, "When will my turn come?" Instead, he asked, "What can I do today?" He remembered another principle from Napoleon Hill. You can control your effort, but not the outcome. Master what you can control, and the rest will follow. Day after day, Daniel poured himself into small acts of effort. He worked, improved, and repeated. Slowly, his frustration faded. He stopped watching the clock. He stopped waiting for applause. The work itself began to give him energy. Closing of part 1. And so Daniel's journey began, not by chasing results, but by shifting his focus to the process. He discovered what few people ever learn, that true mastery lives in the love of the work itself. The farmer, the craftsman, the baker, the inventor, all shared the same secret. The work was their reward, and in time, the results came naturally. Daniel didn't know it yet, but this shift would transform his entire life. His frustration would turn into patience, his doubts into strength, and his ordinary days into the building blocks of greatness. This was only the first step. The road ahead would teach him even deeper lessons about persistence, discipline, focus, and the hidden power that lies in controlling the mind. But for now, Daniel had learned the first secret to unstoppable growth: falling in love with the work, not the results. Why heavy checkmark word count? 10:30. Would you like me to continue and draft part 2 right away? On persistence and patience? Or do you want to review part 1 first before I expand the series? Part 2. The river that never stops. The hook. Daniel stood by the river near his grandfather's farm. The water rushed past him, flowing toward the distant ocean. He threw a stick into the current and watched as it moved quickly, twisting around rocks, bending with the flow, never stopping, never fighting. That night, as he sat on the porch, his grandfather joined him. Did you watch the river today? The old man asked with a knowing smile. Daniel nodded. Then you saw the secret of life, his grandfather said. The river doesn't fight the rocks. It flows around them. It doesn't demand the ocean to arrive sooner. It simply keeps moving. If you live like the river, focused on the work, not the obstacles, you'll find peace. And in time, the ocean will come to you. These words marked the beginning of Daniel's second lesson. Only the work changes things. Lesson 1. Flowing instead of fighting. Daniel realized most of his frustration came from fighting against what he could not control. He wanted results to come faster. He wanted recognition at the exact time he thought he deserved it. He wanted life to move on his schedule. But the river taught him something different. When you focus on the work, you become like water, flowing, moving forward, adjusting, but never stopping. Obstacles don't destroy you. They redirect you. Your energy isn't wasted on worry or fear. It goes into movement. His grandfather told him. This doesn't mean you ignore planning or feedback. It means you hold your plans lightly. You give your best effort, then let go of the rest. That's how strong people live. Daniel thought of the farmers he knew. They planted seeds with love, worked hard, and then waited. They couldn't control the rain or the sun. Yet their faith in the process gave them peace. The same was true in his own life. If he poured himself fully into today's work, the results would come in their season, just like the harvest. Lesson 2. The piano student. A few weeks later, Daniel visited his cousin Emily, who was learning to play the piano. She sat at the old upright piano in her living room, stumbling over scales. Her fingers slipped, the melody broke apart, and her face turned red with frustration. This is impossible, she groaned. But Emily's teacher smiled and said, every mistake makes you better. Don't focus on playing perfectly today. Focus on practicing faithfully. The music will come. Daniel watched as Emily tried again. She played scales until her hands ached. She failed and failed again, but she kept going. Over time, Emily changed. She grew patient, disciplined, humble. The piano shaped her character long before she played her first beautiful song. That night, Daniel wrote in his notebook, "The real prize is not the result. The real prize is who I become through the process." Lesson 3. The Mountain Climber. A month later, Daniel met an old friend who was training to climb a mountain. Every morning, his friend carried heavy packs up steep hills. He practiced tying knots until his hands were raw. He learned to stay calm when storms rolled in. "Why push yourself so hard?" Daniel asked. "Because the climb will demand more than I am today," his friend replied. "Every day I train, I become stronger, braver, more capable. By the time I face the mountain, I'll already be someone different." Daniel finally understood. Results, the summit, the achievement, the applause, were temporary. But the process changed a person forever. It built qualities that no one could take away: patience, discipline, courage, humility. These were not trophies that could be lost. They were treasures of character. Lesson 4. The cook's lesson. Daniel also noticed this truth in smaller ways. His neighbor's daughter was learning to cook. At first, she burned everything. The food was terrible, and the kitchen was always a mess. But she refused to quit. She read recipes carefully. She asked questions. She paid attention to details. Little by little, she improved. But the real change wasn't just in her cooking, it was in her character. She became someone who cared about quality, someone who didn't give up easily, someone who respected the process. The work was shaping her, just as the river shapes the rocks. Lesson 5. Freedom from attachment. One evening, Daniel sat at the porch again, lost in thought. His grandfather joined him, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Why do I still feel anxious sometimes?" Daniel asked. "I focus on the work, but I still worry about results." His grandfather nodded. "Because you're still attached. You still measure your worth by outcomes instead of effort." "Then how do I let go?" Daniel asked. "Think of the painter," his grandfather said. "If he obsesses about selling his painting, about critics, about awards, his hand shakes. His mind is split between his work and his fear. But if he paints for the love of colors, for the joy of light, his hand steadies. He enters flow. The painting becomes alive." Daniel pictured the river again. It didn't force the ocean to come sooner. It didn't compare itself to other rivers. It simply flowed. That was freedom. Freedom meant doing your best without being chained to the outcome. Freedom meant trusting the process, even when results were slow. Lesson 6. The gardener's joy. The very next morning, Daniel helped his grandfather in the garden. "Notice something," his grandfather said. "When I garden, I'm not thinking about impressing neighbors or making the vegetables perfect. I'm thinking about the soil, the water, the care. That's where the joy lives. And here's the strange part. The less I obsess over results, the better they usually turn out." Daniel smiled. He finally understood. When you are desperate, you make poor choices. But when you are free from attachment, you see opportunities clearly. You adapt. You grow. Attachment creates tunnel vision. Freedom opens possibilities. Closing of part 2. That evening, Daniel wrote in his notebook, "The process shapes me. The process frees me. Results may come and go, but who I become through the work lasts forever." The river had taught him well. Obstacles were not enemies. They were part of the flow. Daniel's life began to feel different. His anxiety faded. His spirit grew lighter. He no longer asked, "When will I arrive?" Instead, he asked, "How can I honor today's work?" And as he lived this way, something surprising began to happen. Results started to appear on their own, quietly, steadily, naturally, just as his grandfather had promised. But Daniel's journey was far from over. Ahead waited even deeper lessons about persistence, faith, and the hidden power of the mind. This was only the second step on the path to mastery. Why heavy checkmark word count? 1035. Would you like me to move on and draft part 3, on persistence, resilience, and the cycle of struggle building strength, or do you want to refine parts 1 and 2 first? Part 3, The Fisherman's Secret. It was a quiet morning on the lake. The water looked like glass, smooth and unbroken. Jacob, an old fisherman, sat in his small wooden boat with a rod in his hand. His face was weathered from years of wind and sun, but his eyes were calm, almost shining with peace. A younger man named Daniel had joined him that day. Daniel was restless, full of ambition but also full of frustration. He had been working hard in his business, yet he felt stuck. Nothing seemed to move fast enough. Every setback shook him, and every criticism from others cut deep. As the boat rocked gently, Daniel asked, "Jacob, how do you stay so calm? Don't you ever get frustrated if you don't catch anything?" Jacob smiled. "That's because I don't come here to catch a fish," he said. "I come here to practice the art of fishing. The fish are a bonus." Daniel frowned. "But isn't the whole point to catch fish?" Jacob leaned back, watching his line disappear into the still water. "Most people think that way. They tie their happiness to results. If they catch a fish, they're happy. If they don't, they feel like a failure. But me? I find joy in the process itself, reading the water, choosing the bait, perfecting the cast. That way, I always win, even if I go home empty-handed." Lesson 1. Freedom from attachment. Daniel thought about that. He realized he'd been chasing results his whole life: money, recognition, praise. When he didn't get them, he felt worthless. Jacob noticed his silence and added, "When your happiness depends on what other people say or on what you achieve, you're giving away your power. You become needy. You become fragile. But when you love the work itself, when you find joy in just showing up and practicing, nobody can take that away from you. You're free." Daniel felt a strange sense of relief hearing those words. For the first time, he understood why he was so tired. He had been fishing for approval, not growth. Lesson 2. The long road to mastery. The day grew warmer. The sun climbed higher. Jacob pulled out another rod and showed Daniel how to cast properly. "See," Jacob said, demonstrating a smooth motion. "Mastery takes time. Nobody becomes great overnight. It's thousands of small efforts added together. Most people quit too soon because they're focused on the destination. They want instant results. They want shortcuts. But greatness doesn't work that way." Daniel tried casting but tangled the line. He muttered under his breath. Jacob only laughed. "You're just like every beginner," Jacob said. "When I first picked up this rod, I couldn't cast straight to save my life. My line tangled every time. My hooks got stuck in trees. My hands blistered. But I came back every morning. A little better each day. Slowly, what once felt impossible became natural. That's mastery, patience with practice." Daniel felt a spark of hope. Maybe his struggles in business weren't signs of failure. Maybe they were simply part of learning. Lesson 3. Small progress, daily joy. After a few hours, Daniel finally made a decent cast. The line arced through the air and landed gently on the water. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than before. Jacob clapped him on the back. "That's progress. Do you feel it?" Daniel grinned. "Yeah, actually I do. That's the secret," Jacob said. "Progress brings joy. Results are temporary, but progress is constant. Every time you improve, even a little, you feel alive. That's why I fish every day. Not to bring home a trophy, but to feel that satisfaction of being better than I was yesterday." Daniel realized that's what he'd been missing. He was so obsessed with the big win that he had forgotten to celebrate the small victories. Lesson 4. Becoming unbreakable. As the afternoon came, Jacob shared one last truth. "You see, Daniel," he said, "when your happiness depends only on results, you're fragile. One failure can break you. But when you're in love with the work, you become unbreakable. Failures don't matter anymore. You can always try again tomorrow. That's power. That's freedom." Daniel nodded slowly. He had spent so much time fearing failure that he never saw it for what it really was: feedback. A lesson, not a death sentence. That he thought of his own business, his struggles, the criticism he faced. For the first time, it didn't feel like the end of the world. He understood that as long as he kept showing up, kept practicing, kept improving, he was still growing. And growth was victory. Lesson 5. Trust the process. The sun began to sink behind the trees, painting the lake in gold. Daniel looked at Jacob and asked, "So what's the real secret?" Jacob reeled in his line and smiled. "The secret is simple: fall in love with the process. Do the work for the joy of doing it. Trust that small efforts, repeated daily, will create something extraordinary over time." Just like a tree grows underground before you ever see it rise, your efforts are building roots. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you've grown beyond what you ever imagined. Daniel sat quietly, letting those words sink in. The transformation that night, as he drove home, Daniel felt different. His problems were still there, but his perspective had shifted. He wasn't chasing approval anymore. He wasn't desperate for results tomorrow. He was ready to fall in love with the work, to celebrate progress, to become unbreakable. And for the first time in a long time, he smiled. Because he realized that true success isn't about catching the fish. It's about becoming a master fisherman, patient, calm, resilient, and free. Why heavy check mark? That's part 3 in Story Style, about freedom from attachment, mastery, daily progress, and becoming unbreakable, told through the fisherman's wisdom. Part 4. The carpenter's patience. The sound of steady hammering echoed through the small town workshop. It was early morning, and beams of sunlight cut through the dusty air, landing on the figure of Samuel, an old carpenter. His back was slightly bent with age, but his hands moved with calm precision. A younger man, Daniel, the same one who had learned lessons from the fisherman, stood at the doorway watching. He had come to Samuel because he wanted to learn patience. He wanted to understand how to keep working without losing heart when progress felt slow. "Come in, son," Samuel said with a warm smile, still focused on smoothing a plank of wood. "I hear you've been restless." Daniel nodded. "I've been working hard, but I keep getting frustrated. I want things to move faster. I want to see results now. Sometimes I feel like quitting." Samuel set down his tools and motioned for Daniel to sit. "Then let me tell you a story," he said, wiping sawdust from his hands. "The story of the house that took 10 years. Many years ago," Samuel began, "a wealthy man came to me and asked me to build him the finest house in town. He gave me all the money I needed and told me I could take my time. At first, I worked with energy. Every nail, every cut of wood, I wanted it perfect, but after a while I grew impatient. I wanted to be done. I started cutting corners, using cheaper wood where no one would see, rushing through details, skipping steps. The house still looked good from the outside, but deep down, I knew it wasn't the best I could do. When I finally finished, the man handed me the keys. 'This house is yours,' he said. 'It was my gift to you.' I felt my knees go weak. The house I built was the house I would live in. And because I had taken shortcuts, I had cheated myself." Daniel leaned forward, stunned. "So you ended up living in the house you built?" Samuel nodded. "Yes, and that's when I learned the greatest lesson of my life. You are always building your own house. Every day, with every decision, you're constructing your future. If you rush, if you cut corners, if you let impatience rule you, you're the one who suffers. But if you build with care, with patience, with love for the process, you create something lasting and strong." Lesson 1. The power of small daily efforts. Samuel picked up a chisel and carefully shaped the wood. "Daniel, mastery is never about one giant leap. It's about thousands of small steps. Just like this piece of wood. To make it smooth, I can't rush. I move slowly, stroke by stroke. That's how life works too." Daniel thought back to his business struggles. He realized he had been looking for a big breakthrough, a quick win. But maybe what he needed was to commit to small, daily improvements instead. "Think of a tree," Samuel continued. "For years, you see nothing happening above ground. But underground, the roots are spreading deep and wide. One day, the tree suddenly shoots up, tall and strong. That's what patience does. It builds strength where no one can see, until the results finally appear." Lesson 2. The danger of shortcuts. Daniel asked. "But why do so many people give up or take shortcuts?" Samuel chuckled. "Because shortcuts look easier. But they come with a hidden cost. Imagine baking bread. You can't rush it. If you don't give the dough time to rise, the bread will be heavy and tasteless. Success is the same way. You can't cheat time. You can't skip the process." Daniel remembered all the times he had tried to hack success. Buying courses he never used, copying others instead of developing his own skill. Suddenly it all made sense. He had been baking bread without letting it rise. Lesson 3. Finding joy in progress. Samuel handed Daniel a piece of sandpaper. "Here. Try sanding this board." Daniel rubbed the surface clumsily. It didn't look much different. It's hardly changing, he said, frowning. Samuel smiled. Look closer. Feel it. Daniel ran his hand over the wood. It was smoother than before. Not perfect, but improved. That's progress, Samuel said softly. Tiny, almost invisible. But add enough strokes and soon the wood shines. That's how you build confidence. Not by waiting for one big achievement, but by celebrating the small wins that add up over time. Daniel felt a warmth spread through him. He realized he had been blind to these daily victories. He had been waiting for the finish line instead of enjoying the race. Lesson 4. Building Inner Strength. The afternoon sun streamed through the workshop window as Samuel spoke again. Daniel, when you focus only on results, you make yourself fragile. One failure, one delay, and you collapse. But when you focus on effort, you become unbreakable. Nobody can take effort away from you. Even when you fail, you grow stronger. Every setback becomes another lesson, another layer of strength. Samuel pointed to his tools. See this hammer? It's been with me for decades. I've used it to build hundreds of projects. Sometimes the wood cracked. Sometimes I had to start over. But I never threw away the hammer. I kept swinging. That's what you must do. Keep working, keep learning, keep building. Patience turns failure into strength. Lesson 5. Trusting the process. By evening, the workshop smelled of fresh wood and sawdust. Daniel looked at Samuel, feeling both humbled and inspired. So the secret, Daniel said slowly, is to love the work itself, not just the results? Samuel nodded. Exactly. Success is not a trophy you win once. It's a relationship with your work. The best craftsmen, the best musicians, the best leaders, they keep practicing the basics, even after decades. They know there's always more to learn. That's why they never stop growing. Daniel sat quietly, letting those words sink in. He realized that all his rushing, all his frustration, had come from trying to skip the journey. But now he saw the truth. The journey was the point. The transformation. When Daniel left the workshop that night, he looked at his own life differently. He saw it as a house he was building, board by board, nail by nail. Every choice mattered. Every effort counted. He promised himself he would no longer rush the process. He would no longer chase shortcuts. He would build with patience, with care, with love for the craft. Because one day, he knew, he would have to live in the house he was building. And he wanted it to be strong, steady, and beautiful. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt peace. He wasn't afraid of slow progress anymore. He wasn't desperate for quick wins. He was ready to build his house, patiently, steadily, one day at a time. Why heavy checkmark? That's part 4. The carpenter's patience. About patience, small progress, avoiding shortcuts, and trusting the process, told in story style, around 1,000 words, easy and motivational for an American audience. Would you like me to also prepare part 5 now, continuing Daniel's journey with another mentor/lesson? Part 5. The blacksmith's forge. The sound of iron striking iron rang through the air, sharp and steady, like a heartbeat. Sparks flew each time the hammer came down, glowing briefly before fading into the dim light of the forge. Daniel stood at the doorway, staring at the blacksmith's glowing workshop. The blacksmith, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Elias, noticed him and gave a small nod. Come in, son. Don't just stand there like a stranger. Daniel stepped inside, feeling the heat of the fire on his face. He had come because he wanted to learn how to keep going when life hit hard, how to stay strong when everything seemed to fall apart. Elias set down his hammer and looked at him with calm, steady eyes. You want strength, don't you? Daniel nodded. I've learned about patience, about progress, about effort. But sometimes setbacks knock me down. I lose my confidence. I want to be unshakable. I want to be unbreakable. Elias smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. Then watch closely. The forge has much to teach. Lesson 1. Fire reveals strength. Elias placed a cold piece of iron into the roaring flames. See this metal? Right now, it's hard but brittle. If I strike it, it might crack. But when I put it in the fire, the heat softens it. It becomes shapeable. The fire doesn't destroy it, it reveals its potential. He pulled the glowing iron out with tongs and struck it with the hammer. Sparks flew, and the metal bent under his will. That's how life works, Daniel, Elias said. Setbacks, failures, hardships, they're your fire. They don't come to destroy you. They come to shape you. The question is, will you let the fire make you stronger, or will you resist it until you break? Daniel thought of his own struggles, the times he had failed, the moments he wanted to quit. He realized he had seen them only as punishments, not as opportunities. Lesson 2. Hammer by hammer. Elias continued hammering, each strike loud and powerful. Sweat ran down his forehead, but his movements were steady. "This is how strength is built," he said. "One strike at a time. Not in one day, not in one moment. Every swing shapes the metal. Every effort makes it stronger. It's the same with you. Every day you show up, every day you keep going, you are hammering your own character into shape." Daniel nodded slowly. He had been looking for sudden transformation, a dramatic change. But Elias was showing him that greatness was forged in repetition, strike after strike, effort after effort. Lesson 3. Failure is not final. As Elias worked, one piece of iron cracked under the pressure. Daniel winced. "It broke." Elias calmly set the broken piece aside. "Not every strike creates beauty. Sometimes the metal cracks. That doesn't mean I stop being a blacksmith. I heat another piece and start again. That's the way of life. You will break sometimes. Things will fall apart. But as long as you keep swinging the hammer, as long as you keep showing up, you cannot be defeated." Daniel felt those words strike him deeper than the hammer struck the iron. He realized that every failure he had faced had not ended his story. It had only been one broken piece. The forge was still burning. He could always start again. Lesson 4. Identity and effort, not results. Elias picked up a finished horseshoe from the bench and handed it to Daniel. "This one turned out well. Strong, smooth, ready for use. But I don't tie my worth to this horseshoe. Because tomorrow I'll make another and another. My worth isn't in the result, it's in being a blacksmith. In showing up to the forge every day. That's who I am." Daniel held the horseshoe, feeling its weight. He realized he had been tying his value to his achievements. When he succeeded, he felt worthy. When he failed, he felt worthless. But Elias was teaching him that true strength comes from identity rooted in effort, not outcomes. "I'm a blacksmith whether the piece turns out right or not," Elias said firmly. "And you must learn the same. Be defined by your effort, your commitment, your discipline, not by results." Lesson 5. Becoming unbreakable. The fire roared louder, filling the room with its heat. Elias stood tall, his hammer resting at his side. "Daniel, people think being strong means never failing, never hurting, never falling. That's not true. Real strength means you keep getting back up. It means nothing outside of you can break your spirit. Failures may wound you, but they cannot defeat you. You become unbreakable not because you avoid the fire, but because you learn to live inside it." Daniel's chest tightened. He realized this was the lesson he had been searching for. To stop fearing failure. To stop tying his worth to wins and losses. To root his strength in the daily work, in his unshakable effort. The transformation. As the night grew darker, Daniel helped Elias with the forge. He lifted tools, carried pieces of iron, and even tried hammering under the blacksmith's watchful eye. His arms grew tired, his hands blistered, but he felt something inside him hardening, not in a brittle way, but in a steady, resilient way. When he finally left the forge, the night air felt cool against his skin. The stars sparkled above him, and for the first time, Daniel felt truly strong. Not because he had achieved something, but because he knew he could face failure, setbacks, and difficulties without being destroyed. He whispered to himself, "I am the blacksmith of my own life. The fire won't break me. The hammer will shape me. I will keep swinging." Closing thought. As Daniel walked home, his steps felt heavier, more grounded, like each one was driving him deeper into his purpose. He understood now that being unbreakable was not about avoiding hardship, but about embracing it, using it, letting it forge him into someone stronger than he had ever been before. The forge had given him more than a lesson. It had given him a new identity. He was no longer a man afraid of setbacks. He was a man who would rise again and again, unshaken, unbroken, unstoppable. And with that strength, he was ready for whatever the journey would bring next. White heavy check mark. That's part 5. The Blacksmith's Forge, 1000 words, story style, inspired by Napoleon Hill's teachings. Would you like me to go ahead and write part 6, the final part, Daniel's last transformation and ultimate realization? Next. Part 6. The master key. Within the morning sun stretched its golden arms over the rooftops of Milltown, casting light on a new chapter of Jacob's journey. He stood by the window of his small workshop, gazing at the people rushing along the cobblestone street. For years, he had been chasing after success, searching in books, looking in the words of teachers, and following every plan that seemed to promise a brighter tomorrow. But now, after months of struggle, reflection, and lessons carved deep into his heart, Jacob felt something different stirring inside him. It wasn't just ambition anymore. It was certainty, a quiet, unshakable knowing that the power to change his life had never been outside of him. It had always been within. A letter from the past. On that morning, Jacob opened a drawer and pulled out an old, weathered letter. It was the one his father had left him years ago, the letter he had once dismissed as vague and unhelpful. But now, with new eyes, he read it differently. Son, the world is full of noise. Some will tell you that your destiny is written in the stars, others that it lies in money, or influence, or luck. But remember this, the greatest treasure is not found in the ground, nor given by men, it is built inside your own mind. Guard it well, train it daily, and never surrender it to fear. That is the master key to every door you seek to open. Jacob smiled. The words carried a weight he hadn't understood before. His father had not given him instructions, he had given him a truth. The test of fire. Just as Jacob began to settle into this realization, life tested him again. A large order from a wealthy merchant was delayed because of a shortage of materials. Customers grew restless. Whispers began. Jacob's workshop cannot be trusted. For a brief moment, fear returned. He felt the cold fingers of doubt press against his chest. But instead of panicking, Jacob closed his eyes and repeated the lessons he had gathered like precious stones. Definiteness of purpose. His purpose was not to make shoes, but to build a life of freedom through service and quality. Faith. He trusted that every setback was a stepping stone, not a wall. Persistence. He would not retreat, even if the road was long. Imagination. He would find another way, and then it came to him. He could partner with the local tanner who often had unused leather scraps. It would take more labor to piece them together, but it could fulfill the order on time. Jacob rallied his small team, explained the plan, and together they worked late into the night. When the merchant finally saw the finished shoes, strong, beautiful, and crafted from what others considered waste, he was astonished. Word spread not of failure, but of Jacob's resourcefulness. The secret of the master key. One evening, Jacob gathered a few apprentices who had been watching him closely. They asked him how he had managed to turn failure into triumph, weakness into strength. He told them a story, but not of shoes or trade. Instead, he said, life is like a great castle with many locked doors. Most men spend their lives searching for the right key, wealth, luck, connections, titles. They try one after another and grow bitter when the doors remain closed. But the truth is, there is only one key that opens every door, and it is forged within the mind. That key is made of faith, purpose, and disciplined thought. With it, every obstacle becomes an open gate. The apprentices sat in silence, their eyes wide. Jacob knew that some would carry these words lightly, but perhaps one or two would hear them deeply and be changed forever, just as he had been. The full circle. As the years passed, Jacob's workshop became more than a place of trade. It became a place of learning, where young men and women were taught not just how to craft shoes, but how to craft lives of courage and meaning. And Jacob himself? He no longer chased success like a desperate hunter. Instead, he walked with calm confidence, knowing that success was not a destination but a companion, one that walked beside those who mastered their own thoughts. One afternoon, standing outside his thriving workshop, Jacob looked at the faces of his workers, his customers, and his apprentices. A deep peace filled his heart. He finally understood what his father's letter had meant. The master key had never been hidden in the world. It had always been hidden inside himself, and with that discovery, Jacob smiled, for he knew that no matter what storms might come, the foundation of his life would remain unshaken. Call to action. If Jacob's journey inspired you today, remember this, you already hold the master key within you. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't hand your future to chance or fear. Start today. Build your purpose, protect your faith, and act with persistence. Backhand index pointing right. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that awaken the hidden strength within you. And in the comments below, tell us, what door in your life are you ready to unlock with your master key?